All right, fantastic. I think that we are live. People are starting to trickle in. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to our webinar today. We are here to talk about how to write a developer resume and update your LinkedIn to reflect your coding bootcamp experience. My name is Liz Eggleston. I'm co-founder of Course Report, which is a resource to choose the coding bootcamp that's right for you. So go to Course Report. This is my plug for all of our webinars. Use our directory of coding bootcamps. You can read reviews from alumni, find student and instructor spotlights on our blog. I always ask alumni exactly how they got their jobs, what they included on their resumes, and I've learned a lot about today's webinar subject from those interviews. So definitely check out Course Report. But I'm really excited to have our special guest joining us, who's Randall Browning. Randall is the Director of Content at Skillcrush, and she's created hours of video, hundreds of pages of career resources for Skillcrush classes, and on their blog, which is an amazing blog. She's also coached hundreds of Skillcrush alumni through the process of taking their tech skills and turning them into jobs and freelance gigs. And Randall also transformed her own career and started working in a remote job at a tech company. So she is the perfect guest to help us learn how to update a traditional resume on LinkedIn so that they can really get you that tech job. Randall, thank you so much for joining us. Can you explain a little bit more about what Skillcrush does?
Of course. Thank you, Liz. I am so excited to be here. To tell you a little bit more about Skillcrush, we are an online platform for learning the digital skills you need to make a major positive career change. Our most popular classes are our 3-month web designer and web developer blueprints, and they can take you from being a total beginner to a working coder in just a few months. And we really focus on building a real community between students and instructors, and we prepare students to meet their goals after they finish the class. So my job here is creating content that could give beginners in tech career tools and resources that they need to get hired. So everything from ebooks and blog posts and videos and webinars like this one. And I really love talking to people about changing careers and how you can really transform your resume to help you, because they are so important. And I love talking about how you can transform them into something that could really impress hiring managers. And it's totally doable. Like that, it's this really overwhelming thing, but once you kind of break it down, it's something you can definitely accomplish.
Totally. Well, you are an incredible resource, so we are so excited to have you. So wherever you are on the spectrum of learning to code, maybe you've enrolled in Skillcrush, maybe you're thinking about going to a boot camp, maybe you're in a boot camp now, or maybe you're even a recent coding boot camp graduate. No matter where you are in that career change, you've probably already thought about landing your first developer job, and having a killer resume that doesn't get passed over is really crucial to that. So by the end of this webinar, you're going to understand what separates awesome resumes from forgettable ones, and how a coding bootcamper can really best represent themselves via their resume. So I'm going to keep our presentation up, and we will get started. So just to remind everybody, nobody is going to leave today empty-handed. So at the end of this webinar, we're going to send you an email with a 30-page guide that was created by Skillcrush. It's the ultimate guide to the perfect resume. These guides are designed as step-by-step roadmaps that you can follow. You can complete them. They have actual templates that you can use. All of Skillcrush's guides are so well done. I download them all. This is no exception. Yay! Yeah. And then we're also going to send out an exclusive promo code for 10% off of the Skillcrush blueprint, which is totally huge. They never do this. It's incredible just for this webinar. So if you join this webinar, you are already winning. And then throughout the webinar, we'll ask you to comment and ask questions. So please do that in the Q&A app on the right side of your screen, or you can tweet at us at Course Report. We'll try to get to all of those questions at the end of the webinar. And just remember that we're going to send out the recording of the video after the webinar as well. So if you need to rewatch it, no problem. So also, in the email that you just got this morning, I mentioned coming, or actually I might not have mentioned this, but if you have your digital or paper copy of your resume and your LinkedIn, go ahead and pull those up right now. It's a great time to pull those up if you don't have them already. So we're going to get to do a little bit of workshopping on them. So find a paper copy or a digital copy of your LinkedIn and your resume, and we'll look at those throughout the webinar. We also sent out a little survey to find out a little bit more about what people are most concerned about and most comfortable with when it comes to writing a developer's resume. But I want to pose those 3 questions for everybody watching to get you thinking as we're listening to Randall give us tons of advice today. So these are the 3 questions that we asked about in the survey. So are you having trouble figuring out how to market your coding bootcamp or your new coding skills? Are you wondering what the point of a LinkedIn account really is and how it should actually compare to your resume? Or maybe you just want to figure out once and for all how to fit your resume on Onepage. If any of those apply to you, get started by leaving us a comment and telling us where you're at. When Randall and I started brainstorming for this webinar, we decided to update our own LinkedIns, and I went back into my resume to update it. Just trying to pare it down to 1 page was a serious challenge, and the longer that you spend in the workforce, the longer your resume gets. So I totally identify with the struggle, but Randall is going to help us through it. So
yeah, and to speak to those questions a little bit that you were mentioning, Liz, I have definitely struggled with creating a resume in the past, and I think it will help if I just give you a little bit of background about my story. So 2 years ago, I was just finishing grad school. I had 2 degrees in English, and I had just finished a Skillcrush class on HTML and CSS. So I was really getting into tech, and I had no idea how to fit all of that onto my resume. Like, how was I going to get hired in tech when all my work experience was in teaching college English and working in student jobs that seemed to have no connection? So maybe you're just like me and you have just too much school on your resume, or you could be someone who has 20 years of experience and can't figure out what the heck to cut so it fits on 1 page because you're like, well, I did all this work, I don't want it to disappear. So that's what I really want to talk about. And when I did get hired at Skillcrush, demystifying resumes for people changing careers like me was really important to me because it can be such a big, if it can feel like such a big barrier. So I'm super excited to share those tips with you so you can leave feeling confident about writing a resume that can get you the job you really want, you know, whether you're coming from a totally different place or not.
Incredible. Yeah, I've watched Randall go through a resume and do edits on it, and it's like a miracle. So she's the perfect person to talk about this. So I just want to go through the plan for today. So today we're going to talk through some resumes and do's and don'ts. So that's going to include 3 things to add to and delete from your resume right away. We're going to have examples that will show you how to put those tips into practice. Then we're going to talk about some LinkedIn tips and best practices, especially in tech, and that's going to include how to best sell your new coding skills. We have a really good example of that also. And throughout the webinar, you're going to see live examples, real-life examples of resumes and LinkedIn profiles that have actually landed jobs. One is actually going to be a live edit with our friend Karen, who's about to graduate from a coding bootcamp, and she's getting back into tech. So we're going to look at her resume together. I'm really excited for that. She'll join us in a little bit. So let's get started. So before we dive in, Randall, what are some of your best practices when it comes to resumes?
Sure. So I think the first one that I like to talk about is that you kind of have to get rid of the idea of having a generic resume, like just creating one resume and then using that to, like, you know, shop around and just sending it off into the internet. The thing is that recruiters and hiring managers, even at smaller companies, they don't have a lot of time to look at your resume. So what's really going to make you stand out is if your resume makes you look perfect for the job. And one single resume can't make you look perfect for every job. So you really need to tweak it and change it to put you in the best light for the job you're applying for. So that is one big thing that is kind of annoying because it means you have to do, like, keep working on your resume all the time. But I think the best resumes are like working documents that you're changing all the time to fit the job you're applying for. Okay, a second one is making sure that you are portraying yourself in a consistent way across the internet. So that doesn't mean that your LinkedIn needs to, like, exactly match your resume, because then your resume would be like 10 pages long. But I think you should make sure that you're updated across all of your online kind of platforms, because what's going to happen at companies, especially most tech companies, is that you're going to apply for a job and they're going to look at your name and then they're going to Google you. And if your personal website says you're a teacher and your LinkedIn says you're a developer and your Facebook says you're in college or something, that I think they're immediately going to lose trust in you. So making those consistent but not perfectly matching is a really good thing, especially applying for jobs in tech.
Totally.
Let's see. Another one is to just stay active in the industry and include things like volunteer experience or meetups, because you can always be adding to your resume, especially if you're changing careers, like I bet a lot of us here are. And to prove that you're really committed to getting into that new industry, so you can always be adding to your resume and making it more and more appealing. And the last one is kind of obvious, but to spell check and get a friend to grammar and style check everything, because the more you look at it, the less you can notice things like that.
Totally. Okay, so that's a really great place to start, especially with just getting our bearings straight when it comes to putting together an application and a resume. So we're going to talk about some specifics. So Randall, I know you have a ton of insight to share here, so I want to start by touching on some of your users' most pressing questions about resumes that have worked in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
that's great.
When we get a time, yeah.
I just want to make sure, like, can you see the presentation?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, I think it's just on my end then, so thumbs up. Yeah, so a common question that I get is, how do I make my resume fit on Onepage? And I think that is a really hard one, and I think the answer is ruthless editing. So taking kind of like your darling projects and asking, does this project apply directly to the job I'm applying for? And if it doesn't, then just cutting it. So like if you are applying for a job as a developer and you have like a job you did in college, I don't know, working in the bowling alley. Even if you were the manager and you were really proud of that, if it doesn't have anything to do with the job you're applying for, slashing it. And another way to make that ruthless editing a lot easier, and this is what I did the last time I updated my resume, was I didn't even take my resume and like try to edit it. You know, I just like printed out a resume, put it somewhere else, and then I got a resume template. So a one-page resume template, and then I filled it in. So when you have a resume template, you have like 4 things to put in your experience. You have 1 spot to put like a skill set you have. So instead of like taking like this kind of history of my career and trying to pare it down, it was like, oh, you know, fill in this little box. And I think that makes it a lot easier to, instead of feeling like you're deleting everything, to feel like you are adding the perfect things to the resume.
Totally. You're like being proactive instead of like retroactive. That's awesome. And we're going to actually include a one-page template in our follow-up email too, which Randall just shared with me, and it's an excellent template to get everything on one page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the one I use for my resume, and we've sent it to lots of our Skillcrush students, and even though it's a template, you can tweak it to like make it look branded for you, but like that is so useful to me. Okay, what's another common question? Just how do I decide what to include on my resume? So, I mean, there's the basics, like your contact info. You want them to be able to get your resume and have nothing else and get in touch with you. And that is going to include how to find you on the internet. Like, your address is not very important, and even your phone number is not as important as an email address, LinkedIn, GitHub, link to your portfolio. That's really important. Because if you think about it, like, what do you want someone to do when they get your resume? Like, find you, right?
Totally.
Like, find you and talk to you. So it's like top thing, make sure they can find you and talk to you. And then I think a great way, considering that you are updating your resume and tweaking it for each job you're applying for, is to have a job description in front of you and make sure that you are speaking directly to what they want. So, like, if you can't decide between 2 things, does one of them demonstrate something that they want in the job description more? You know, include that.
Completely. That's a great way to cut down on just like text in the resume too and get it on the one page.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then this is a question that I think is probably really relevant to our audience, because I think a lot of our viewers may have like zero experience in the job field that they're applying to. So this one's really important. What if you're changing careers and like getting into tech or getting in your first developer job? And I would say just like think about your past experiences, your skills and values that you can leverage into that new career. So if you haven't had a job as a developer before, like think about current projects that you could include. Maybe you haven't been a web developer or a UX designer before, but you've been a teaching assistant in a coding workshop or at a UX workshop, or maybe you've done like some volunteer work that you can showcase and really show that you can do the job. I think like we all know that degrees are getting less and less important, hopefully, but maybe even like a new certificate that you've earned in that field can be really helpful if you haven't had direct experience in that like job role before.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that even I had this at first, just thinking that every bit of experience you list has to be like paid work experience, and that's really not the case, especially in tech. Like you want to be sharing the experience that is the most relevant, and sometimes that means like a volunteer project you did, you know.
Totally.
Let's see, another question that I get a lot is, how do I deal with a gap in my resume? So if I took time off work, what am I going to do? So like maybe you went back to school, or maybe you were taking care of kids or something like that. So a great thing to do is to think about what you've been doing during that time when you were off work. So like we were just talking about, just because you weren't getting paid to clock in 9 to 5 doesn't mean you weren't doing something that was really great experience. So especially if you just took a coding boot camp, I imagine that you took some time off and you were learning, but I'm sure you produced a lot during that time. So what you can do is list that as an item on your resume, like say, like the role you were having at school. Like, Liz, I saw a resume you had where it said like hacker in training, and that's like just what you were doing for 6 months. And then to include projects you did during that time, like actually link to some of the projects you did, because I think that shows that there was a gap, but you were producing and working and growing during it, and that's really powerful. And I think if you took a gap off to like take care of your family, you can still include that. And I'm imagining that if you're getting back into, if you're trying to get a tech job, that you've been working on some tech skills during that time. So I think you can do the same thing, like link to projects you produced during that time.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we talked a little bit about, listing that you were a hacker in residence or another like sort of a TA position at a boot camp. So I want to talk a little bit about the secret sauce for coding boot campers specifically, because I know that people are probably coming from Course Report and from Skillcrush.
Yeah.
So we want to think about a few things when you're a boot camper and you're building your developer resume. So first is how to best represent your boot camp. Your goal here is obviously to show that you are part of the tech community, even though you may not have a traditional background. So first you want to have a short bootcamp description and maybe even like a link to a reputable article about the bootcamp that you went to. I think it's important to remember that you know exactly how intensive the bootcamp that you just did was, but a hiring manager at a big company might not even understand what a bootcamp is. So that little like description of what you did will actually be really important.
Is that like, yeah. Sorry to interrupt, Liz, but is that like, you could even put that, I think like you have so much expertise about like how to talk about your boot camp experience. Mm-hmm. Is it like you could put, I went to like this boot camp on your resume, and then in parentheses like read more, like a link?
Totally. A read more link, mentioned here link would be amazing there. I think that's a really cool way to show that the school that you went to was actually legit. Then you want to outline some of the tech skills and the soft skills that you learned, obviously the technology stack that you learned. When we say soft skills, like, optimize towards sort of like technical soft skills, so things like agile methodology, Scrum, etc. All of these things will be great, like soft skills to mention. And then while you don't need to include every project that you did at a boot camp, you definitely include your capstone project. And I think this is something that Randall pointed out to me, like include your role in the project. I think that's really important. This is also a good place to sort of like tailor the skills to your job description. So like if you did a lot of front end on a project, make sure that you include that if the job is for a front role.
Yeah, like instead of saying like worked on like app for grocery shopping, say like built entire like front end of app using like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript or something like that.
Absolutely, I love that example. Then the other thing is to mention the amount of hours that you spent. So some of these boot camps can be like 800 hours worth of training, and that is huge, especially like if you compare that to a CS degree or a sort of traditional undergraduate degree. And this is just another way to sort of lend legitimacy to your alternative education. Mention how many hours a week or how many total hours the boot camp was.
And do you think you can do that for self-study too? Like,
sure.
I spent X hours studying this rather than just being like, I did it in class,
Sure, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's hard for put yourself in a hiring manager's shoes. It's hard to sort of tell the difference between, a Skillcrush course versus a, immersive in-person boot camp versus a self-guided, online tutorial. So make sure that you're being really specific about that.
I'm like taking notes.
So next you want to include the boot camp in your work experience also. And we talked a little bit about this before, but this would be like including, freelance jobs, teaching experience. If you are a hacker in residence, include that in your work experience too. A lot of boot camps will have the opportunity to stay on after you graduate and be like a hacker in residence or a TA, and those are like legitimate jobs. Those are serious jobs. You're still working. You're still doing, projects. You can definitely include those on your resume. And then finally, I would say don't hide your past education and your past career. But I think this is a really cool opportunity to show the intersections between your past life and your new tech skills. This sort of reminded me, I had a conversation with a woman named Andrea, who was the placements director at Coding Dojo a few months ago, and she gave me a couple of really good examples I just wanted to share. So she was talking about if you were a marketing coordinator before a boot camp and you want to be a front-end developer after the boot camp, then your background in marketing can actually be really potentially helpful to the user experience. The ins and outs of marketing, and now you know how to code. So that's going to make you a better front-end developer, and you should obviously make that more clear to your company. If you were a writer before you decided to break into tech, obviously that's going to help with communication. There are tons of parallels that you can draw, but I would not hide a non-technical background just because you want a developer job.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you just switched, it would be kind of empty if you didn't, explain what you were doing before.
Totally. Yeah, and we're going to talk about LinkedIn in a second, but the LinkedIn summary is a really cool place to sort of show that intersection. If you think about it really thoughtfully, you can definitely come up with some the intersection of where your tech and your passions, your tech skills and your passions lie.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I think we're going to take some time and look at an example that Randall brought. We've got all of these sort of tips now. So let's look at a real example. So we're going to look at Irma's resume for before. Can everybody see this? Let's make sure. Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Cool. So Randall, we're on Irma's before.
Yeah. Got that right here.
Let's look at some common problems that she might have made that other people are making too.
Sure. Okay, let's see. One thing is that if we just start at the top, I would take away how it says web developer in training and accountant. The reason I would do that is because I think if you want to get hired and have the hiring manager trust you, like you wouldn't want to say in training, just say what you want to be, like make it aspirational, like Irma Ruiz, web designer or web developer. And I think the same with accountant, like that's more describing what you used to be, not what you want to be defined as now. So I would just make it say Irma Ruiz, web developer. Another one is the summary.
Yeah, let's remove the summary.
If you're going to kind of describe yourself, you would do that in the cover email or cover letter or on your LinkedIn in the summary box there, but here it's just kind of taking up space.
Totally. Do you think, can we remove some of the months and dates from the work experience and only use years?
Yeah, that's a tip I use a lot, especially if you are worried about a gap. So like, let's say there's a gap between like May and November of 2010. You can just say you worked there from 2009 to 2010, you know?
Totally.
And I think it also just decreases clutter, because I know personally when I'm looking at someone's resume, I'm not looking at it like, well, what the heck did you do in April? I'm like, I'm just looking at really how many years they spent somewhere.
Totally. So Irma has education at the top of her resume here, and that's in accounting. So I would say that's the education here is not the most important section. So I would take that away from the top too.
I totally agree, and I think the reason is that, like you were talking about, that education is becoming less and less of a main factor in getting hired. That it's like, your education is great, but the most important thing is the work you've been doing. So, like, you want that to be the first thing they see, not the education.
In a similar way, Randall, Irma's got a merit scholarship, honors program, dean's list, like a lot of education, like academic awards here. What do you think about including those academic awards?
Yeah, I think like, this was especially hard for me because I don't know about you, but in college I was like a real nerd and like really proud of all the like little awards and scholarships I got here and there. And so I saw the resume as like, finally I can display these, you know. But it's really like, unless you got an award, like unless you're trying to be a web developer and you got an award in like tech somehow, it's really not relevant anymore. I think the only case when you might mention one or two awards that aren't related is if you're coming fresh out of college.
Okay.
But I think like looking at this, she graduated in 2008, and that's like ancient history, you know?
Yeah, completely. And then she's got 5 jobs here in her work experience. Which ones do you think are sort of irrelevant to getting a tech job?
Yeah. Okay, so when I look at this, it's like the top one is awesome because she put like the most relevant experience first, and even though it's freelance, it's really great that she listed that as work experience. And then I think it's great that she has listed her accounting jobs because you can see that she moved from junior to a higher level, and I think that's important to show that she could be dedicated and move up. And also, there would be nothing left if she didn't talk about her work as an accountant. The things I would start to take out are summer intern, because an internship in a different field is really getting less and less relevant unless you happen to work on like an app, you know, or something there. And definitely the bartender job, because that's really just filler. Like, look, I did something during that time. It doesn't make you any more qualified for the job.
Totally. Okay, so we're taking off summer intern and bartender manager.
Yeah, like I think the summer intern one is like, we could go back and forth, but definitely the bartender one. Uh-oh. Let's see. Am I froze or is Liz froze? I think I'm still live. I'll keep talking as if I am. Okay, let's see. So we're looking. Oh wait, can
We
you hear
lost
me?
you for just a second, but I think we're back.
I couldn't tell if I was live or you were, and I was like, I
No, it
think I'll
actually
keep
was probably
talking.
me.
Okay. Okay, so we were talking about, yeah, the jobs to take off. So I was like definitely the bartender one, and depending on how the resume is looking after updating it, like probably the intern one.
Okay, cool.
And then another thing that is really like maybe the most important is the skills section on the bottom, I think. That she has it's really good that she's listed her HTML and CSS, her new tech skills, but if you think about it, that is probably the most important thing. Her work experience, like directly followed by her new tech skills, and it's almost the last thing. So think how far, like how well you would have to hold the manager's attention to get them to see that.
Totally.
So I think that the skills need to be much higher up on the page. And the other thing is that I think her advanced tech skills are so much more important than like outdated things like being able to use Microsoft Word or a typing speed, that those just, I think they kind of make you look like you don't understand the industry. Like, if you thought typing speed was important, I might think you were a little out of touch with like getting a developer job.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you might be like proud of it, it goes back to just using like the most relevant skills and experience.
Right. Okay, and then can we strike references upon request? Is that
Yeah,
relevant at all anymore?
I mean, like, have you like no one ever is like, no, you can't talk, you know?
Right. It's
Like,
kind of
so
a
yeah, it's filler, you know.
yeah, and in a world where we're trying to get everything onto one page and every line is important, like, who needs it?
Yeah, it's like include references upon request or bring the font size down to 10.5.
Totally. Okay, so Randall, you've done some resume magic to this resume. So we're going to look at the after. It's beautiful. And this is actually the one-page template that we're going to send out also because so everybody can use this to make their one-page resume.
I do have one tiny revision on this, is that
Oh, okay.
after talking to a lot of people recently, I would scratch the address at the top and just add all of my links. Like she's got her personal website and her email address. I would add LinkedIn and GitHub and just strike the address.
Right, because what do we use addresses for anymore? Yeah.
Yeah, and
I totally agree.
it's like want someone to like stalk you, you know. I don't think that's really gonna happen, but it is kind of like filler now, you know.
Totally. Okay, so definitely change the address. That's great advice. What else is working about this resume other than the fact that we just did all of those lovely changes that we talked about?
Yeah, so to me, top two most important things, like if you're only going to do two things, is the way she moved the skills up to the top by adding a column. Now that is one of the first things I see, her tech skill set. And the other thing is that her work experience and her skills are aligned.
Right.
That's kind of the same. But the other thing is that she has linked to projects throughout, and I think that makes this like so much more powerful. Like all I need now is this document to find everything I want to know about Irma, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I also like that education is still on there, but it's actually visually like under training. So she's sort of telling the hiring manager like, yeah, I have this degree, but like what's really cool is that, you know, I've been doing the Skillcrush class and like I learned web design and WordPress from it. I think that's
It's like she's ranking it for them. Like this is the most important thing you need to know about me.
Absolutely. You also added primary caretaker here.
Yeah.
And this is such a good example of how to do this work experience gap.
Yeah, I think this is, I've talked to people who are worried about putting caretaker on there, but I think more and more hiring managers and companies this is just real life. Like we all have lives and then we sometimes we leave the workforce to, you know, be a caretaker.
Right.
And I think this is a great way to handle it. And like she linked to some work she did during that time to further drive home that she was active during that time.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I love those links to the websites that she built. That's so cool.
Let's see. One other thing is adding bullet points.
Mm-hmm.
I think you don't have to use bullet points on every single one, but
Right.
I did this to show how it's way easier to look at the prime takeaways from each experience rather than a paragraph. It's like, these are the most important things I did at this job, you know?
Absolutely. Well, this looks so great. I want you to make over my resume when we're done with this.
Ooh, I have one more.
Yes.
It's that she's added, and we'll talk about this in a second, I think, but she added numbers. So, like, if you look at the account manager position, even though that's in a different field, I think the fact that she has changed it from just kind of generally saying the work she did to saying onboarded over 30 corporate clients in just 2 years, a company record, is like, wow, she's impressive everywhere she goes, you know?
Absolutely.
So using those numbers is powerful.
Yeah, and I love the community section too. Sorry, we could talk about this all day, but I love the community section too, because it shows that she's actually like committed to being in the tech community, growing it, developing it as well. So working with Girl Develop It and a Code in Schools volunteer, all of those
Yeah, definitely
would stand out. Amazing. Okay, well, now I'm going to go back to our presentation, and I want everybody to take action. So in the beginning of this, we told people to grab their either a digital or a paper copy of their resume. So it was so helpful to see those real examples. We've gotten like a ton of tips now, but I'm sure that you're wondering like, what can you do to actually tweak your own resume right now? So grab your red pen, grab your resume. We're going to add some things and delete them. Yeah. Randall, what should we add? I mean, what should we delete first?
Yeah, delete. So the first thing is irrelevant information. And I know we're in a live webinar, so you're going to just do this quickly, but somehow that's better if you can't think about it. So I want you to get your red pen or highlight and delete anything that doesn't directly apply to the job you're applying for. So is it a job from way in the past, more than 5 or 10 years ago? Is it an aspect of your former work that doesn't carry over? Is it, you can do 5 or 10 years prior, depending on how long you've been in the workforce, or anything when you're getting into more than 4 positions is a little bit too much to take in. Okay, so X out irrelevant information. Next, you can get rid of out-of-date information, and I think this one is pretty, this is easier to get rid of because I think it's more obvious. So academic credentials, skills like word processing or typing. Let's see, even your GPA, unless you just graduated, academic awards like we talked about. So that means you're slashing right now irrelevant information that doesn't help you get this specific job and anything out of date. Third is meaningless filler words. So references upon request like we talked about, and tired descriptors. Like, does it say something like go-getter, a team player, goal-oriented? The reason those are out is because we've talked about how generic won't work. You want it to be specific. So using specific details is better than generic things. So meaningless filler words, we can cut those.
Yeah, we actually have a question. Obviously, we're going to do a question and answer later, but about like what soft skills you should include. And another one that I see a lot is like excellent communicator. And I'm like, oh my gosh, everybody is. Use things like, show that by saying like, I know Agile methodology, I've used Scrum before, you know, things that show that you will actually be a good like team player and communicator in an actual development team.
Yeah, that's a good exercise. To like take something like team player and be like, when was I a team player in this job, and now I'm going to talk about that instead of saying team player.
Absolutely. Okay, so viewers right now have slashed irrelevant information, slash out of date info, slash filler words. Fantastic. Oh yeah,
Want to talk about what we should add?
Yeah, what should we add?
Okay, so we saw Irma do this, to put in the job title you want to have. So describe yourself in the role you want. Maybe it's web developer, Ruby developer, mobile app developer. and make sure that your resume is directed all towards that one goal. So this is like, you can keep looking up to it. Does this thing I'm adding make me look like a good Ruby developer? You know? And to arrange your skills in a way that point to that. So the top things need to be showing that you can become that Ruby developer. So adding the job title you want to have. Second is to show, don't tell. And that's what I was saying about how it's a really great idea to add numbers whenever possible. So to use real numbers and action words to show what you've accomplished. So here's an example that I could use on my resume. So if I said, I grew our subscribership, that doesn't do anything. But if I say, I grew our subscribership from 17K to 100K in 6 months, that's like, whoa, you know? Or here's a techie example. You could say, I did code testing. Instead of that, say, I implemented a code testing system that saved our team 7 hours a week. And I'm like, I'm going to hire you right now, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that how much time you save a team is actually a really cool metric. As opposed to, like, obviously you want to include gross numbers in a lot of places, but like think about how you save time. That's so cool.
And links. It seems simple, but it's easy to forget, especially because for most of my life resumes were only printed out. So links to relevant projects throughout, like Irma had, and also making sure to link to your portfolio and GitHub at the top.
Right. Yeah, because when you save something as a PDF, like, it's obviously going to keep the links there. Amazing. Okay, cool. So it is all of your turn now. So take your red pen, take your resume, put a star where you need to focus your resume on one goal, like Randall said, and create a more coherent story towards the job that you're looking for. And then put a star where you can find actual real statistics to explain what you accomplished. So the examples that Randall gave were like anywhere that you grew the company's like revenue or subscribership, or anywhere that you saved some time for your team, are great places to add real stats. And then obviously put a star where you can link to examples and proof that you actually did some work and did some cool projects. Those are 3 great things that you can add to your resume. So now that we are totally versed in how to edit our resumes after we went to a boot camp or when we have some new coding skills, let's talk about LinkedIn for a little bit. So if you can, if you're watching, pull up your LinkedIn profile right now. Randall, do you suggest that all of your skill crushers have a LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, as annoying as it is to have to do resume and LinkedIn, if you're in the job market in 2016, you must have a LinkedIn. It's true that some employers will never look at it, but many hiring managers, like I said, are going to type your name into Google before they do anything else. I mean, that's what I would do. And you want to be able to control what comes up. So you want to have control over what's popping up, and a LinkedIn would be something high on the list. And also, lots of recruiters are only looking on LinkedIn. So they're going to type in someone within 25 miles of where I am who can do UX design. If you're not on there, you don't have a chance.
Right. Yeah, I think that's such a good point. It can be a great like networking tool. Obviously, recruiters are looking on LinkedIn for you, and also you have a little bit more room than your resume to show like your personality and to show some of the projects that you're working on. So I think LinkedIn is actually pretty fun. Randall, what are a few things that viewers can do right now to polish up their LinkedIn profiles?
Okay, so this is my pro tip after doing my own LinkedIn a couple weeks ago. First, manage your notification settings so that your entire contact list doesn't find out every time you make any update. And that's pretty simple. You can just like go into your settings, and it's high on the list, so you can tell people have had that problem before.
That one changed my life because I used to be so embarrassed to like make updates and say that I like had a new job and things like that on LinkedIn because everybody would get spammed, and I was like, no, please no. So that was a game changer.
Yeah, and I think you can turn it back on when you're done updating, so people see if you like post an article or add like a training event. but it is super embarrassing to be like saving multiple drafts of your summary over and over again, and everyone's getting notified, you know.
Totally.
Another thing is to list a current position even if you're currently unemployed. So similar to the way you could handle a gap in your resume, you can give yourself a current position even if it's not paid or full-time, like I was saying, hacker in residence, or user experience designer, and you can always say you're freelancing if you're just doing a few projects.
That's a good tip, yeah, freelance.
And I've heard that from recruiters that they'll search by current position. So this is going to help you show up in search results. So just like on your resume, if you want to be a Ruby developer, I think it's a great idea to put Ruby developer as your current position and then describe that you're doing freelance work below it.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Weird.
Okay.
Okay, and then contact information. This is one that people forget.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of want to do just like you did on your resume, and have an email address you're comfortable with, your personal website, and your GitHub. Especially in tech, I think GitHub it seems like it's always getting more and more important that you have an active profile on there, so linking to it. You want to make there be fewer and fewer steps for the person who's researching you. Like they already Googled you, or hopefully they clicked your LinkedIn from your resume. But now you want them to Google GitHub and then your name. It would be so much better if they could just link to it from there.
Absolutely. Okay, so adding contact information. So those are three things that we can do like today. And then three things we can do this week. So it might take a little bit longer, but definitely doable.
Yeah. So one is to add popular tech skills so you can start getting endorsements from clients and even your classmates at your boot camp. And I know that can be awkward, but I find I started doing this with testimonials to like work with someone, and if we were happy at the end to say, hey, let's swap testimonials. And I think that's a great way to kind of like get that ball rolling, is to do like an exchange with someone. But if you don't have those skills you want to be considered an expert in listed, it's going to take a long time for you to get endorsed for them.
Absolutely.
Another one is to write a summary that shows your skills and experience, but also that you have personality. So I think you should include your goals, because this is really like the what I want to do section, like why you would want to talk to me. I think you should also say what gets you excited and the type of work you love doing. So I think your resume and your LinkedIn can speak to what you're qualified for, and your portfolio can as well. But this is your chance to say, like, this is what I really love. And, you know, I think that helps people know what they should get in contact with you about. I think especially for you, if you are transitioning, like maybe you are taking a coding boot camp and getting out of a different field and moving into tech, putting a few sentences about how that former industry feeds into your new one.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a good one that I've practiced with trying to be more tactful about it, is to make it positive. So instead of I was sick of never moving up or feeling valued, and that's why I want to move into tech. Say, I really wanted to do important, valuable work where I can learn and grow often, and I knew tech was the place to do that. So I think that makes you seem, I think the more positive you are, the more people you're going to attract. And I think just a few details that show your personality. So just something little like, oh, by the way, I think mine says, like, I'm always on Instagram talking about vegan food. It has nothing to do with, like, my work goals, but it makes you more personable. Okay, so we've got things you can do this week are adding popular tech skills for endorsements, writing that summary, and the third one is to start using the blog feature on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you'll already be blogging about what it's like to learn to code, or if you're posting blog posts on other people's blogs, you can syndicate it here. Yeah, I think that's going to show you're active.
Totally, yeah, because obviously, like, if you're in a boot camp, like, you should be blogging anyways, so get it on LinkedIn too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we have an example of a really great LinkedIn from a real coding bootcamp graduate, actually. So I'm going to take people through this one. This is Lowell. He's actually a developer at Course Report, so he gave me permission to use this. But it's an awesome LinkedIn, and I want to point out a few things really quickly that Lowell did really well. First of all, he uses LinkedIn to its potential, like right off the bat. You see a video of him presenting a web development project at a demo day at his bootcamp. Like, that's an amazing idea. He also puts his contact information. It has really good, good contact information there. It's really clear that he's involved in the developer community. So you can see that he was a teaching consultant, or is a teaching consultant at Dev Bootcamp. You can see that he's a volunteer teacher with ScriptEd. I think both of those things show that he's like going beyond, above and beyond doing the bootcamp or like learning to code. He actually like wants to be a real developer. And then he also includes his projects with links to the GitHub repos on his LinkedIn, so you can see, like, you can link from here. And I actually just talked with, just like a little pro tip here, I just talked with an alum from WinCode, which is in Miami. That Q&A is on the blog, Julie, and she had a really great piece of advice, which is to put everything on your LinkedIn, like all the projects that you did in a boot camp, but if a project has a password, if it's password protected, make sure that you provide a sample username and password so that it doesn't just redirect to a blank screen. I thought that was like very, nitty gritty, but like a great piece of advice. And then the other thing that I loved about Lowell's LinkedIn is that he really represents Dev Bootcamp well under education. So he puts his bootcamp under the education section. And for anyone who doesn't know what Dev Bootcamp is, who's reading this, he has a really clear one-sentence description with all of the technologies that he learned there. So he says 18 weeks of full-time learning, includes the number of hours covering various topics in computer science, web development, and software engineering, and then includes all of the technologies he learned with the actual projects that he built. So that's I think this is a great LinkedIn example for somebody who just finished a coding bootcamp. LinkedIn request Lowell on LinkedIn today.
Yeah, he's gonna have a ton of notifications.
Yeah. So, right. So that was Lowell's great example, and then now it's time for you to take a little bit of action. So now you have a ton of information from Randall, from Lowell's example to work with. So let's see what you can do right now to bring your LinkedIn into the present. So I want everybody to take 30 seconds, not too long, and make a list of 3 things that you want to add to your LinkedIn summary. So remember that this is the paragraph at the top of your LinkedIn that shows your intentions and shows your personality. And you can finish that process with the Ultimate Guide ebook that we're going to send out after this. Think about a couple things that will include your intentions and your personality. Okay. All right. So we have learned a ton of lessons on resumes and LinkedIns. We've got all of those tips in mind. So we're actually going to take a look at do a live edit with Karen, who is joining us. I'm going to unmute her. Or Karen, do you want to unmute yourself? So just press the little microphone button. Okay, so while she's unmuting herself, Karen was in tech years ago and is now at an actual coding bootcamp. She's at Origin Code Academy in San Diego. And so she's updating her skills in tech, but she has a little gap in her resume in terms of like modern tech skills. So when we sent out our survey, Karen responded and she was like, yes, this is perfect. Like, show me how we can sort of bring my resume into the tech world and really like represent the bootcamp well. So Karen, are you unmuted?
I see her moving.
I know. Well, that's fine. So that's okay. So we can still look at her resume together, Randall. Let's
Sure.
look at, okay, so I'm going to pull this up. And I changed Karen's address information, although one of the tips that we got from Randall was to nix that address information anyways. Randall, can you tell us what you think Karen is doing really well on her resume right now?
Yeah, and I guess I want to give a little caveat, which is that like sometimes it can be valuable to say where you're based, like, especially if you're in San Francisco or like somewhere associated with tech, to say like just say the city. So I think that there's a place for that for sure. But yeah, you don't need to say your street address. So anyway, yes, let's look at what we really love. Okay, so definitely the links at the top here. It's clear. Like I might not even look at her resume and just go, like, as soon as I get this, click all these links and find out everything I need to know.
Yay!
Fantastic.
Karen, do you just want to tell us, we gave a little quick background about why you're here, but do you want to just give us like a quick background about what you've been doing for the past few years and your goal after you graduate from Origin Code Academy?
Yes, well, I used to work as a software developer, and I love technology, and I'd like to get back into it, so I decided to go to Origin Code Academy to update my coding skills, and today's the last day of class.
Wow!
Woohoo, congratulations!
Yeah.
That's amazing. Congratulations on graduation. What's your goal after you graduate? Do you want to get like a front-end developer job? Are you looking at back-end? What do you think?
I would like to work as a full-stack developer if possible, working on the front end and the back end. And I'm definitely going to start looking right away. I already started applying for some jobs, but I'll have more time once the class is over because I've been working very hard on my capstone project.
What's your project? What are you working on?
It's a project to aggregate the students' blogs because right now the Origin Code Academy blog website is kind of behind, because the blogs have to be put on there manually, and my project will automatically gather them and put them on there.
I love that project, especially for a coding bootcamp project, because it means that you can actually like link to the live project when you're done with it, and show employers like, look how I improved. It's kind of a meta project, right? Like you can show them how you improved the actual site. That's really cool.
Yeah, I love it that it will really be used.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, plus it's actually useful, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So, Randall, you were saying we love the links.
Yeah, Karen, the links are great. With the fact that you have the links at the top, that's great because lots of people will just click over to those and get everything they need to know to decide about hiring you. After you said you want to be a full stack developer, I got a quick idea is that you can put that at the top somewhere. So, Karen Snyder, full stack developer, because especially when you have knowledge of a lot of different types of technologies, being able to say at the top, this is what I want, makes the rest of it much clearer. Because now that I know you want to do full stack, I'm like, okay, so she wants to do use all of these skills, you know?
Oh, okay. So you mean next to my name, I should just say Karen Snyder, full stack developer, or under my name, or?
Yeah, I think there's different ways to format it, but yeah, close to your name is a great idea.
Oh,
That's a cool idea because it can kind of like almost, well, we're going to talk about the summary in a second, but it can almost like replace that, which is a cool space saver. Randall, do you think that we need to have like, the links are so cool, but do you think we could actually just link to like the word GitHub, LinkedIn, and portfolio, or do you think we need to
definitely.
Okay.
I think everyone, it's common knowledge now that if it's a different color and it's underlined, it will be linked. So I think that you can definitely do that, especially if you want to make it look cleaner and save space. That said, if this is going to be printed out, having it, the actual link included, means that they don't need it to be digital to get to those. So I think there's an argument for both. I would probably do it this way just because of that second reason, that even if it does get printed out or the links go missing, you can get the link yourself by looking at it.
Okay, cool. All right, what else do we love about this resume?
I love that the skills are so prominent. It's really clear to me that, Karen, you consider that the most important thing, or at least one of the most important things that an employer needs to know about you, these are the skills I have. So I really like that.
Yeah, I love that too. I think even above education, skills being there is really cool.
Definitely.
Okay, so what are three? I know we're sort of nearing our almost running out of time, so we'll go through this really quickly. But what are three action items that you think could really transform this resume? First, I just want to point out that it is a little bit long, right? Like we're almost at 2 pages. So just so people know.
Yeah, so that definitely tells me that you can find some stuff to cut. So you can hone this down to choose the things that are most relevant for each job you're applying for. So maybe all of this can end up on your LinkedIn, but not all of this will end up on your resume for every single job you apply for.
Okay.
Yeah, so we would like in the summary section, I feel like we can get rid of the summary section.
Yeah, like you can get rid of the summary entirely because they can read about you on your LinkedIn, on your portfolio. If you want to include some of the information from the summary throughout, let's see, you could move those first 2 bullet points to the skills section where they really are already accounted for. So I think if you include the REST APIs somewhere, then you would have it all accounted for in your skills section.
Okay.
Totally.
Let's see.
Third bullet point.
Yeah, so
the third bullet point is something we can improve with examples, right?
Yeah, so you don't need to say that. You can prove that you're great at learning tech skills just by showing what you've done in a certain amount of time. So you don't need that. Let's see. And I think you can save the information for the 4th point for your cover letter or your cover email. Like say, I'm a remote worker who loves working on teams. Here's some work I've done. So you can get some extra space on your resume if you talk about that just when you're communicating.
Yeah. So that will put skills like actually at the top. And if we use that like 1-page template, then maybe even side by side with education or with projects. Okay, cool. Yeah. So that's the summary. We can rework the summary and even delete it.
Another one is I would rephrase the bootcamp education section. So the dates are listed twice, so you can simplify that and just list them once. And I think that you can do a little bit of what Lowell did on LinkedIn, and instead of saying just I'm a graduate and this is my cohort, saying 12-week intensive study boot camp in San Diego.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah, because like, well, I would read that, you know, Liz would read that and be like, oh, I know exactly what Origin Code Academy is, and like that it's a legit boot camp. A hiring manager might just be like, who knows? Is this Code Academy? Is this, you know? So yeah. Okay, great advice.
Let's see, one more. The project.
Yeah, and Academy. I just put there because I was told I shouldn't have holes, and my last job ended end of January. Since it's all online.
Yeah, I think you can solve that by just listing the years instead of being too meticulous about months. You cut out a little bit, so I hope I was answering what you were talking about.
Right.
Okay. Okay, one more bit of advice. Let's see. The project section. I think it's really cool that you included projects, but one thing I would do to make that more powerful is to rephrase the descriptions to emphasize your role. So you did a great job of explaining what the project was, but if you can say exactly what you did, I think that can be even more powerful. So if we're looking at Med Agenda, group project for healthcare scheduling system, developed with Agile methodology, I think you could say pair programmed using this kind of code language, and I did like this part of the project. I think that would be a really great way to also demonstrate your full stack skills.
Totally. And then at the bottom we've got languages and references. I think these are two things that we can actually save space on.
Yeah.
move the languages to the skills section because it's
or
really
just
cool.
use them on LinkedIn.
Yeah, for sure. And then obviously remove references available upon request, as we know now.
One
go ahead.
more is with these projects. I think it's really impressive that there's so many, but I think it would actually do more for you if you choose for each job that you apply to, the top 2 or 3 that are the most powerful and the most relevant to that job you're applying for, and saving the other ones for your portfolio, because I think that makes you more targeted, and it's easier for the person to remember, oh, that's the person who built the exact kind of thing I'm looking for, rather than like, that's the person who's done a ton of projects, you know?
Absolutely. So choosing a couple for each job, yeah, I think that's a really cool way to write it. Randall, Karen and I were talking before, and I think her biggest concern, and I'm going to scroll down to the professional experience, is that her last development experience was from more than 10 years ago. So what changes would you make to the professional experience section, which is quite long? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So my idea for this would be to take those projects, and instead of having separate projects and experience sections, make your top experience item be like developer in residence or something like that, and list your projects underneath it. So now you have super recent tech experience with really relevant projects as your top thing. So that's just an idea. Another idea I have is to just really emphasize in all of your jobs, even if they aren't extremely tech-oriented, what you did that did give you tech skills or tech experience. So I see that, for example, this copy editor job, you check the content of computerized English teaching programs. So even though that's not developing, I think as much as you can emphasize the techie aspects, the better. And another thing is, I think you can just, you don't need to list so far in advance. I think, let's see, I think you could cut off at after the copy editor. I think that if someone's looking to hire you, they're most concerned about your recent work. But if you're afraid about, if you're wanting them to know that you have worked in software development before, even if it was a while ago, I think you could just reduce that last job listing. See how it has 3 that's in the following locations? I think you could just shorten that down to 1 and say in it that your role changed over time and that you did software development.
Yeah, I think that's a huge space saver. And also, Randall, I know you mentioned this a little bit before, but I love the idea of removing the months from here and just using years, because it sort of accounts for that. If there is a small, month to month job gap, it totally accounts for that. So.
And especially when it's been 10 years ago or something like that, taking 1 month off isn't a big deal anymore,
Totally.
Okay, and then what about volunteer experience? I participated in the Hour of Code event last week, so should that be on my resume or only on LinkedIn?
I think if you can fit it on your resume, that is a great thing to do. If you look at that template that we used, and you'll get after the webinar, there's a spot for putting an award, and I think, or a community activity, and I think picking 1 or 2 that can show you're involved in the community already, it just makes you more appealing, because it makes you seem like you're not totally new. You're already working in the community, and I think that would make hiring managers more comfortable.
Oh, okay.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Karen. I really appreciate it. This was amazing to have a real resume and somebody that's actually in a boot camp. And I feel like you're in a really similar position to a lot of our viewers. I'm getting a lot of questions in the Q&A app, and a lot of people are in your same position. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck. Yes, congratulations on graduation day. So exciting. Amazing. Okay, so I'm going to restart this. We are on our Q&A section. So we've talked through how to update your resume. We talked about how to update your LinkedIn for modern job market, particularly in tech, particularly if you graduated from a boot camp. So obviously we're going to send you away with a free ultimate guide to the perfect resume and a promo code actually for Skillcrush. But before that, we're going to answer a couple of user questions. I'm just going to choose a couple because we're running a little bit over, Randall, but I know everybody has actually like incredible questions. So we'll also try and get to some of these later. So one is from Shirley, who asked, what if your only tech experience are boot camps and online tutorials and your work experience is not tech related at all? Like, what can you sort of pull from your boot camp and online tutorial or like Skillcrush into your work section?
I think the first advice is to, like, you don't have to wait to get hired to get experience with your new skills. So this doesn't necessarily have to do exactly with your resume. It's the work. I think if you're worried like you only have training and no work experience, the top of your list is like get experience. So code something for yourself. You don't have to get paid or hired by someone for the project to count. So build projects on your own. Find, even if you need to start with friends or family to do a project for, that's something that you can showcase. So you can say, freelance developer, these are the projects I'm working on. The second thing, I think, is to just put as much information as you can. So your resume is always going to be in progress. So I don't think you have to think of it as a final document, like, oh, it looks like I don't have any experience. I think you're just always adding to it. And what I would do also is to emphasize as much as you can the skills, like we've talked about, changing the way it's organized. So your skills, your training, projects you're working on, and community activities. So those can really help to shift the impression of you to have more experience than you maybe do while you're doing those projects.
Yeah, I love the idea that you were talking about before of like defining what the order of importance is. Like if you put skills at the top and you have a lot more skills than you do, work experience, I'm automatically, as a hiring manager, am gonna sort of think of it that way as well.
Yeah. So like you have control over what you show first.
Totally. Somebody asked a question specifically, Samantha asked a question specifically for Skillcrush, which is, should we highlight Skillcrush blueprints similarly to a coding boot camp?
Yeah, I think you definitely can. I do, and I think it's up to you how much detail you go into. I think a great thing to do is, like Liz mentioned, link to an article where it's mentioned, or just link to the website so people can check it out. And other great tips are to, instead of just saying, training program or blueprint, because they might not know what that is, say you did like 3 months of intensive study and you learned like XYZ skills and built these projects.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so here's one question from Cami, which actually might be a little bit similar, but I think is a cool scenario. So Cami is a developer with many years of experience in C#, and then she did a Skillcrush web designer and web developer course on Ruby on Rails. Did you have any advice when she's applying for Ruby on Rails developer jobs? How should she organize things so that they can see she was a developer before? That's actually really similar to Karen.
I think, you would I would always put what's most relevant to the job you're trying to get now at the top. So even if your Ruby skills are fresher, I think you can still put those at the top. And I think you would just list your previous experience below it and include that in your skill set. And another great way to handle that is to, in one sentence in your cover letter or cover email, say, I have X years experience in C# and I'm transitioning to Ruby because I love it for all these reasons. And then you can handle it that way.
Okay, fantastic. We're getting a lot of questions or comments just saying that they love the one-page template, which is fantastic. Yay. We're going to send that out afterwards, so I'm really glad that people like that. Okay, and then last question, which is something that I wonder about all the time, is about portfolios. So Brittany wanted to know when she needs to have a portfolio. Does she need to include it for every type of job? And that's something that I actually wonder, like,
yeah, I think that it's like in the ideal world, you definitely have a portfolio for whatever kind of job you're applying for. So like I should have a content marketing portfolio to showcase work I've done. And I understand that when you're on the job market, your portfolio tends to get shuffled to the back, like your resume and your LinkedIn feels most important. But I think that your portfolio is the visual element that shows what you can do. So if you're actively searching for the job, I think it is very important. I think sometimes your GitHub can stand in for that depending on what field you're in. But I think that as soon as you start getting digital skills, you should start building a portfolio. And I don't think it needs to be perfect. Like you don't need to wait to debut it until your portfolio is everything you imagined it. I think it's more powerful to show what you've done so far than to wait and wait.
Yeah, I was talking to a placements director at a boot camp, and she actually phrased it really well that a portfolio can be really important, but it also shouldn't be like a tool for procrastination to actually apply for a job. So work on your portfolio, but don't wait to apply for jobs until you have a portfolio.
Yeah, and I think if you don't have your portfolio yet, like Liz is saying, and you see the perfect job, your remedy is just to, in the email, say these are 2 recent projects I did that show why I'd be great for this.
Totally.
And there you go,
Fantastic. Okay, so I think that's all that we have time for today. As always, email us with questions, liz@coursereport.com, hello@skillcrush.com, or you can find us on social media. Oh, I also want to mention this, which is a huge thing for everybody that joined today. Use the discount code CourseReport2016. It's good for 10% off, which is about $40 in savings of any Skillcrush blueprint in January, February, and March. I'll include that in the follow-up email also in case you can write that down quickly.
And we love to talk about it. So if you email hello@skillcrush.com, we can talk to you more about the blueprints if you are like, what is that?
Absolutely, yeah. The Skillcrush blueprints are really cool. They're all done online. It's a really cool community. Ada has given me access to the Mighty Bell community and things like that. It's really cool to watch everybody interact.
Yeah,
so.
And it's great too if you're a complete beginner or if you've taken a break and you're trying to get back in. It's totally appropriate for you to use Skillcrush to learn the skills you would need to be in demand in the tech job world again.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So just a couple of next steps. So you've learned all about writing resumes and LinkedIn's to get you hired. Now it's time for you to act. So we will send you, and we'll share this, we'll post this, this free ultimate guide to creating your dev resume that was made by Skillcrush. And after you work through the guides and workshop your resume and your cover letter, send us a tweet at Course Report and at Skillcrush. All of our contact information is here. You can leave us a comment on Facebook telling us what you found to be most useful and help some future resume makeovers. So thanks everybody for joining. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much to Randall. You were fantastic. And thanks to Karen for joining us live for a live edit. Very brave. All right, bye Randall. We'll see y'all at the next one.